Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, where each week Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property investing. Hello, mate.
We do, mate. Short week, Easter week.
Oh, how good. 2 short weeks in a row.
And school holidays. I mean, I think...
Well, it signifies the end of school holidays.
I think Jane is ready to give the kids back to school.
Yeah. No, this has actually been a good school holidays. This is probably the first one that I think my wife's really embraced.
Oh,
the kids are a little bit more mobile, a little bit more independent, which is good. But, mate, how exciting. Just as we lead into Easter tomorrow, we've got Q&A day.
Yeah, Q&A week, Q&A day, whatever we like to call it. It's a favourite part of our... Favourite part.
We haven't done it for a while. We've had some awesome guests for the last few weeks.
It's been amazing.
So hopefully everyone's got some value out of that content. But mate,
I love it.
Mindset minute. Now, I don't want to drag the mood down low here, but I've got to build a context.
Okay, do that.
In the last 100 days, my family's been to 3 funerals. So, which is not great.
No, terrible.
But there's a fair bit of reflection. 2 parts of the reflection. One, you hear so many great things about these people when they've passed, and you didn't realise when they weren't passed how great they were. So we've got to find a way to actually tell people when they're alive all this really good stuff. But that's not my point today. Clearly, when you do see life from that perspective, you realise that for me, 1975 to whatever, hopefully 2075, hopefully. But ultimately, your life comes down to a dash. For you, it's 1971 dash.
I see where you're going with this.
2071.
Yeah. So that's like on the tombstone thing.
Yeah. So I've never quite thought of it until I reflected that everything we do just comes down to a dash. So the question is, what are you going to do with your dash?
I love it.
And I'm in my early 40s, despite the fact I look like I'm in my early 30s.
You keep saying that to yourself, so I still think you look 40 plus.
Mate, I appreciate that. I actually take looking old as a compliment. But
why do you keep getting your hair rinsed then?
Got the blue ring. I got a bit of salt and pepper on the side, which is the only thing that gives me my vintage. But but the people who are a bit older than me tell me it speeds up very, very quickly.
Yes.
The older you get. So, what's the context of that? Have we thought about what we want to do with our dash? And the context of property investing is the earlier in your dash that you start the property investing, the better the later part of your dash can actually be. I was listening to a podcast last night, Tim Ferriss.
Yep.
And he was, I think it's Mr. Moustache, I can't remember his blog.
Yep.
And he lives his life on $25,000 to $27,000 a year.
Wow.
But not frugally. He's got a very experience-rich life. He's got a very time-rich life. But he's just found some really good hacks. And so the thing is that for a lot of people, and we bring this to this point home here, that you don't have to have $100,000. A lot of people think that if they need to retire, that they need $100,000, $200,000, $300,000
we put it in the book, but just as a round number, $2,000 a week.
$2,000 a week. But the way to think about it is whatever you need, you just multiply it by 25. And that's how much capital you need outside the family home. So if you're on $50,000 a year, you need $1.25 million worth of income producing assets outside the family home. Your life
That's a really good point. Do you want to say that again? Just so people...
Multiply what you need by 25. So this guy can live on 25,000, Ben. So if you multiply that by 25, I'm just giving myself a really hard number here. Is it 500? 25 times 25 is, oh my goodness, 1.25.
Yeah, 1.25. I would have thought it was 1.25.
No, it's less. It's 600 and...
Let me just...
Let's just...
Are we finance experts here or what? This is as authentic as it gets.
I'm a numerical engineer. I can actually... 625. Oh, I said that.
Yeah, 625. So 625,000.
So all he needs is $625,000 worth of income producing assets for him to live. And he doesn't have to work anymore. So... Have a real good think about what you want to do with your dash, folks. Some people need 200,000, but some people only need 50. We've got we know Simon who only needed how much? 17.
Oh yeah, well Simon and Sarah.
Yeah,
they only needed. They could live on 12.
Yeah.
But 17 is basically what they've been living on.
Early 30s, has retired.
Done. been around Europe and everything like that. They're doing it. They're doing it well.
Exactly. So there you go, folks. Your life comes down to a dash. What are you going to do with your dash? And in the context of property investing, the sooner you can start, the more you can take advantage of the wonderful effect of compounding, so that the latter part of your dash, Ben, you've got more choices. So I think that's a bit more than a minute, but there's my mindset minute today.
I love it. That's very good. So, yep, make sure you think about, also with the funeral piece in there, like life is short. It's as short as a dash. Try and fit as much into you can, and it doesn't have to all be materialistic.
And the other context is, if you think about yourself when you're 80 and look backwards and see what you want to get done with your life.
Yeah.
And that gives you enormous perspective.
I mean, bucket lists are big for me. I have a passion for travel.
Yep.
In fact, I have a passion to look at natural wonders.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get to every World Heritage listed area. So I've got a little long-term incentive. Have I told you this?
No.
So my
Mate,
little long-term, obviously I worked in tourism in my earlier life, and so Great Barrier Reef and Uluru and Katajuda National Park. So
Uluru sounded like a sign-off.
So all of these wonderful places around the world, these natural wonders. I've been to the Grand Canyon. And I get more out of that than sometimes I get out of man-made, churches and that type of thing. So, one of the little things I want to do post-retirement is to get around the world and get to all of the World Heritage listed areas. So it would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Just travelling around and getting off.
Can you rattle off a couple?
Oh, well, there's the Galapagos Islands would be a perfect one. It's amazing down there. I think Antarctica is also World Heritage listed.
Machu Picchu, is that heritage?
Machu Picchu, is that natural wonder, or is that a man-made wonder?
I haven't researched it like you.
So a lot of national parks, a lot of beautiful, pristine areas. That's hence why they get their World Heritage list. It's got to be unique. It's got to be significant. There's quite a lot of them around the world. Yosemite National Park. We went to try to go to Yosemite one time when I was younger, but that had a lot of rain and there was a landslide, and so we couldn't actually get in there. So there's lots of them.
How good's the Grand Canyon? I was in a helicopter when we went over that.
It's crazy.
And they kept it just above the trees as we were going out. We had headsets on. There was music on, and then all of a sudden the music was building, and these pilots are so clever that the timing is such that as the bottom just dropped out as they flew over the canyon, the crescendo of the music in my ears, it was the most amazing thing they did. So
it is. Yeah, I was quite young. I was 13, and to walk to the edge, walk to the edge. Basically, it's distinct because there was snow. And there's no fence. This thing, you can't fence it.
Yeah.
Wait until you see it. You cannot fence this thing. Yeah. And you walk in, the old man's yelling at, slow down, like a bit of snow, and you and then as you start to get closer and you see, it's almost half a mile drop, and you're like, oh, this is ridiculous. But anyway,
we were on a bus with about 7 people on a Kentucky tour, so we were sober this day. It's early on, and there was about 7 people, including the tour guide, the driver, and about 5 others that had seen it before. So they all got out the front, and the 35 of us who hadn't, we all stood there, hands held, and the 7 who had guided us to the edge. And so we just stood at the end of the Grand Canyon. They go, right, open your eyes now. And then, so you didn't even see the build-up. Wow. It was really cool.
That's the amazing part. So obviously you can see how excited we get about talking about one natural wonder. That's part of your dash.
Absolutely.
So bringing it back to So
you're impressive, Kingsley. The way you pulled that back,
mate. It's all about big rocks in the jar.
He does listen to me, Ives. He gives the impression he doesn't.
Sometimes.
So, all right, Q&A day.
Let's go. Let's get into it. We just wasted 9 minutes. No, it wasn't wasted.
No,
it's all good stuff.
It's all good stuff. Our listeners are used to us now. They know there's no pre-rehearsed. Bernard sent us in a question. Yeah, I always say Bernard, but it's Bernard.
Well, Bernard, it could be.
G'day, gents. I love your show. It's really given me a different perspective from other property educators. And it's one of those differences which gives rise to the following issue.
Ooh.
You speak a lot about being a borderless investor. Mm-hmm. Yes, we do. And buying quality assets in those locations where the market is in the right stage of the cycle. Mm-hmm. At the moment, this might mean Brisbane or Hobart or Adelaide or wherever. That's all good. You're also clear that Sydney and Melbourne are the places which will grow most long term. That's all good too. If I'm only going to buy 4 to 5 properties to secure my retirement though, as you advocate in your book, I certainly want to be buying the best long-term performers that I can. Mm-hmm. I know that done well, I can make good money doing this in smaller markets, but long-term I would expect to do as well as in the larger metropolises. Sorry, I'll say that again. But long-term I wouldn't expect to do as well as in the large metropolises. If I was buying 10 houses, I could carry in some weaker assets, but with 4, it's obviously vital to get them right. How would you advise someone who already owned a couple of, in brackets, hopefully well-selected properties in Brisbane or Adelaide or wherever who was able to reinvest? Should they hold off, build up a bit of equity and increase their cash buffer before looking at Sydney or Melbourne when the heat has come off there? Or would you suggest buying again and taking the risk that they will never get into the larger markets?
That's pretty cool.
That's a good one.
That's a really good one because we're getting from the sort of macro down into the micro.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things there that just jumped out at me because it's the first time I've heard the question. The first one is, even though we talk about Melbourne and Sydney as being markets that we absolutely would love to see clients hold and investors hold 1 or 2 assets in, it makes sense. You know, these are our international cities. It's where the higher incomes are. But there are still some lemon locations in those areas in terms of where the income growth is going to be slower and the supply of vacant land or the risk around oversupply is still high. So you can actually still buy duds in the bigger cities. So when we look at borderless investing and we're looking for capital growth, what we're basically saying to ourselves is in the bigger cities, there's potentially hundreds of suburbs on our watch list, and we're measuring the supply and demand associated with those. And as you get to the smaller cities, say Adelaide, so an example might be Sydney, we might have 400 suburbs that we're constantly watching. Melbourne's probably 300 suburbs that we're constantly watching. And then we go down into Queensland, Brisbane as a city, we're probably watching about 180 suburbs. And in Adelaide, we're probably watching about 80 to 100 suburbs, right? So the reality is there's still elite pockets and high status pockets in those particular markets. So if your budget doesn't allow you to buy that $1.2 million investment property in Sydney or that $800,000 property in Melbourne, and it only allows you to buy the $600,000 property, well, that $600,000 property in Adelaide could be a better investment medium to longer term because the people in the areas that we're looking at in the demographic profile that we're overlaying with the supply and demand story will actually tell us that they are still very good areas to buy in. Now, if you even take that same principle and look at areas in bigger towns like Wollongong or Ballarat or Geelong, Newcastle, southeast Queensland, so Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, those types of things work. Now, on the Sunny and the Gold Coast, it's a little bit different because it's a coastal community, so there's no sort of central business district, so it's a little bit harder to get the data right. But again, you're looking for lifestyle and you're looking for owner-occupier appeal and all those other things. So the way in which I look at that is to say, I always like to think, and if you go back to, Jan Summers' appearance on the podcast, what she was talking about is when's the best time to buy the property right now. There's no better time than now. But I would want to see the numbers before I made a call on do I save for another 2 more years and try and get into Melbourne or Sydney versus if I can afford 600, do I go now? On balance, I'd probably go now into one of those secondary markets because as long as I'm buying close to the city and doing all of those other things that I'm looking for, it makes sense.
Oh, very well said. Cash flows always tell the story, as you like to say, Ben. We bought a property for a listener, a client of ours. I won't say his name just for privacy, but he had $1 million to spend as part of the plan. So in Melbourne, now $1 million is a 2-bedroom on 200 square metres in the inner west.
Yeah.
We ended up buying in Adelaide in a suburb called Prospect.
Beautiful suburb.
Which is, you look on the map how close it is to the CBD.
Beautiful.
And he bought a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car space, period home on 700 square metres.
Stunning.
For $1,040,000.
Yeah.
So if we go back to the practicality test and the scarcity, is that asset in Melbourne for a 2-bedroom house a good asset? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But we could get a 4-bed.
Yeah.
We could go borderless and get a 4-bed on 700.
And again, it comes down to the circumstances of cash flow. Like the numbers always tell the story because that particular client, I think I know who you're talking about, has strong cash flows. So when they have the strong cash flows, the yield, because people might say, well, Adelaide, who's going to be able to afford that?
$800 a week.
There you go.
The yield was outstanding.
The yield was outstanding. So everyone has this view that these areas don't necessarily have lots of tenants who can afford to pay that. But there could be, doctors on rotation, Royal Flying Doctors based out of Adelaide to work Broken Hill and up in Cooper Pedy and whatever. And all of a sudden it's like they do want them. Now, are there hundreds of those renters out there? No, there may not be, but you don't need hundreds. And there's not too many properties at that higher end that people are willing to pay.
And I think the key for that question is, Ben, you're not buying Adelaide. You're not buying Brisbane.
Totally.
You're not buying Melbourne. You're buying a property in a localised street in a localised suburb with its own heartbeat that's going on. So, but as a general principle, I would have said if someone's building a portfolio of 4 or 5, you'd want to look where you can to get exposure in one of the big markets. Doesn't have to be first or second, but at some stage, because of the fact that they are world cities. But
and timing is important. So I agree. You wouldn't want to buy into certain markets at the peak of the market. So that's where the demand and supply story and the economic story of the state and the city is also going to be important.
Yeah, because one thing you've got to be careful about is some of the other states is, their economic story is great. So I'm always conscious of the fact that we can bring interstate money into other states, but it's the locals who've got to rent it and the locals have got to get a job to be able to sustain it. So that's the thing that we're looking for. Great question, Bernard. I think it all comes down to your cash flows, but ultimately, at some stage, you want to have some Melbourne and Sydney exposure if you can. But in the short period, you might be able to go to some of these other markets, get a spike in your equity, which means that you can enter into those bigger markets.
And either way, it's going to be successful. You build a multi-million-dollar property portfolio, you base it on the income that you want to have, to live your dash, as we call it. So that's also going to be an important part of that as well. So it doesn't have to be Melbourne and Sydney. Ideally, we'd like to see it there, but if you go and buy 5 or 6 great properties around the country in elite areas, you're done.
Well, let's think about Jan Summers, who we had a few weeks ago. Yeah. All Brisbane.
Yeah.
She built a substantial Pyrenees walking around France lifestyle, business class with 6 sets of Nikes when she goes shopping in Brisbane. Primarily.
Yeah, Queensland, southeast Queensland.
Our mate Peter Koulizos, hard to say.
Koulizos?
He's
the
built
property
his entire
professor
portfolio in South Australia.
Yep.
So
there you go. So there is ways to do it. So
Prue Muirhead.
Prue.
Entire portfolio in mainly South Australia with a little bit of
Mildura.
Victoria.
There's a couple of Victoria in there as well. But there you go. So
it can be done. Victoria, is that almost South Australia?
No, it would be New South Wales more.
Isn't it that spot where it's all 3?
Oh, close. It's close. So but it's more New South. Yeah.
The Mildurans are going to write us a letter. We are Victorian.
Come on, we did a presentation up there for CPA. We should know where it is, but we flew in and flew out.
Flew in and flew out.
All right, Alistair. Hi, Ben, Bryce, and Ibis, or Ibis.
Ibis.
Probably best
How
way
do they spell that? IBIS?
Yep, that's the one. It's IVIS for me.
Lucky it's not IBS. Irritable.
There we go. Okay. There's our little stop talking about me.
Yeah.
Can we have our finance expert or tax expert come onto the podcast? Well, you got me at the moment, mate, and Bryce. So we'll get some more tax experts on. Here we go. I have a loan where I've paid in extra into the redraw. No offset. No offset. I had a strategy to break the loan and refix for a few reasons. The rate is significantly lower. I'm hoping I can claim the break fees as a cost, reducing their effect. Also, I want to pay my interest out of the redraw. Can this be done? I feel the break fees are permitted, but the part where I pay interest from the redraw seems an impossible dream due to the mixed purpose loan effect and that the ATO considers it as tax avoidance. Any guidance in this matter?
Well, there's a bit going on there, Alistair. I've only heard that for the first time. Here's a couple of things for people to ponder to take to their accountant, Ben. When it's tax advice, we can't give it.
Yes.
But here's a few things for them to take to their tax accountant to ask the
general.
question.
We can give general facts, statements of fact.
Redraw is dangerous because you're putting in money into an investment loan, and ultimately when you pull it out, you've got to be careful what you're pulling it out for, because if it becomes a private nature, your intention started to be just to save a bit of interest, but all of a sudden you've polluted the loan. You've changed the nature of the loan. So let's say you put $1,000 in there to park $1,000, but you're going to pull it out next week. The problem is when you pull it out next week, you pulled it out for a private purpose, Ben. You know this very well. So they've pulled that $1,000. So now the accountant needs to go and account for that $1,000, the interest on that $1,000 for the life of the loan. That's no longer an investment purpose loan. So that's the number one thing. I know you're going to give more insights than me.
That's a great start.
The break fees, my understanding, Ben, is that they are deductible in the year that they're incurred, whereas the loan establishment fees are over a period of 5 years. so they can be amortised over a period of 5
Correct.
years.
But check with your accountant.
Absolutely, check with your
Check
accountant.
with the accountant, but I agree. My understanding is that's similar to lender's mortgage insurance for those people who want to know. If the lender's mortgage insurance is for investment purposes, we do know that is over 5 years. So I'll be pretty sure of that as well. So there's a few things that go on here, and it's a big mistake that most people make, is they punch money into the loan and then take it out, and they just think that that's okay.
There's no redraw in the money smarts, Ben.
There's no redraw in the money smarts, and lines of credit is another problem where people have a facility, they use a bit of it for the deposit on their next investment property, and then they use a bit of it to buy a car. Now the ATO does not like you mixing purposes on a loan product. So let's say we did then say, but I've paid the car loan back first, and the rest of the $60,000 deposit is for the investment, so I should be able to claim the interest on that $60,000. Shouldn't I, Bryce? But can you? No, you can't do that, because the ATO looks at it and says, we believe that the investment debt is the first debt you've paid because you've mixed purposes. Okay, so because you've mixed purposes in that particular loan, can't happen. So that is always problematic. So what is the message here? Make sure you speak to an accountant, and that accountant is having a conversation with the mortgage broker so you can get the right strategy and the right structure in terms of how you invest. If you take the redraw out and use that as a deposit for a new investment property, it should be tax deductible. But if you are mixing purposes, don't do it. We say these days, standard variable home loans, professional packages are probably better than basic no frills type home loans, and that's why we advocate for offset accounts. So you're in control of the liquidity, and you're not breaking you've got a delineation between the offset account and the loan account.
Ben, there's a solution. It's a very easy solution.
Get help.
Investment savvy.
Oh, there we go.
They would never structure the lending in that way ever.
No.
They know the splits. They know how to structure it. They know about pollution. They know all this stuff.
That's right. And they should be giving education around that. They can't give tax advice. Okay. And when we talk about tax avoidance, it's just basically saying it's not avoidance what you're trying to do. You're just basically trying to claim something that you're not allowed to claim. Okay. Avoidance is where you set up a structure purely to evade tax, and that's illegal in this country. So, from that point of view, I'm sure, it's a self-reporting system. I'm sure people are trying to get away with it, but, they're data matching, and the ATO wants their revenue, the government wants their revenue. We want to pay down our outstanding ridiculous debt that we have in this country. So it's really important that we all pay our way.
Here. Well done. Now, I don't know how to pronounce this, Ben.
What have we got? You don't ask me.
Laquinda.
Laquinda. I think that's a very. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
that's a lovely name, Laquinda.
It is a Laquinda. Very nice name. 3rd of September. So it's taken us a while to get to this one.
Sorry, that happens.
Thanks for that. Thanks for hanging in there, Laquinda.
That's last year.
I have been listening to your podcast while driving. Thank you so much for such a priceless info you share with us. I recently started my property investment journey and bought a new house in Western Sydney to get the government benefits, and bought 2 investment properties in Loganlea after rezoning. After listening to your podcast, I realised I didn't apply most of the filters you guys talked about. Both my properties are over the median price of the suburb. Both are over 6% yield, so not that painful to hold. First investment property is a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2 living areas, 800 square metre with pool for $400K. Second is a 4-bed, 2-bath, 800 square metres for $380K. Western Sydney property, which is the owner-occupier, did great, bought it in the end of 2014. By June 2016, property revalued at $150 more without landscaping done.
There's a living in that.
Totally. I know you guys talked about Brisbane a few times, but it would be great to listen to what you think about Logan area and recent rezoning of Loganlea. Questions. Is it okay to pay a higher price for houses that fall within the higher medium density or residential core for future land bank? Thanks again. So this comes down to like a category of assets, I reckon, because, I think if you rewind back to the early 10 episodes for us, we talked about, what drives price, and we think that income is part of that, and it's around borrowing capacity. So I used to live on the Gold Coast, and I used to work in Brisbane when I first got married. And I used to go through Logan every day on the train. So And it's interesting to observe it from that perspective. And I think that largely it's around a demographic of people. The question is, where do we think their income ceiling is and where do we think their income potential is? Because ultimately that's what's going to dictate the price. So
Correct.
for me, in terms of that area as a location, I see it more as either balanced asset or an income asset rather than a growth asset, because I think that there is a bit of a ceiling because of income.
Totally.
But I know there's a lot of people that are quite bullish on the area. So, but for me, it's purely a definition thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with the area. It's just, for me, if the strategy required growth, I have a view that I'd go somewhere else.
Correct.
If I had a strategy that needed income, I'd definitely be looking at that.
Yep.
And I think over 6% yield is almost confirming that anyway. But
So the way in which we approach these types of locations is a demographic profile. So Bryce was sort of alluding to that when he was talking about the observations that he has for the area. When you look at the data, and it's very exciting this year, we're going to get new data in regards to demographics of areas. Can't wait for it. It'll validate a lot of the things that we've been doing. So if you are going to go into a balanced market, meaning that you're chasing a bit of growth and a bit of yield, or a yield market, the reality is this, from our point of view, if we buy in these areas, we would not buy over the median at all. In fact, we would prefer to be buying about 20% below the median. So it's almost like an insurance policy that, even if there is soft movements in the market, we're going to be protected. So we're not going to be buying the house that's been trashed. Okay, so it's still got to have good bones, but it doesn't have to be the bling. It doesn't have to be the brand new. It doesn't have to be the townhouse. And I know you're sort of thinking, well, wouldn't that attract the slightly better profile demographic tenant? Yes, it would. But the point I'm saying is that you can be sitting on this property. It may be paying for itself in the sense that it's covering the debt on the property, but without that growth, how ultimately are we going to pay that property off? And then there's the opportunity cost of that. So it's not to say that we don't look at areas where the demographic profile is lower, okay, in terms of the location. But if we're going to do that, we'll take an insurance policy. We call it compression risk, where we're going to be buying the properties that really can't go any lower. So the single mum who's had an unfortunate falling out in a relationship, whatever, they should be still able to afford this property. And then the only growth we're going to get is basically system growth. It's effectively area growth that's just going to drag up the value over time. So it's above inflation usually. And what we do know about areas like Logan, Logan Lee, and those types of things is, owner-occupier appeal. What is going to change the gentrification of that area? What are the drivers for gentrification? Usually it's about convenience, it's about lifestyle, and it normally spreads from a central business district location outwards. It's very rare, almost impossible, that you get gentrification happening in the outer suburbs. Unless it's a gated community, and they've got a private lake, so there's always very small exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, you won't get that gentrification, so you won't get a rush of people going in there. And if you overlay that with the concept of status and people buy human interest, human behaviour stuff that we keep banging on about, there are suburbs that have stigmas. Not that Logan's a huge area, right? Massive area, and it's probably not as bad as some areas, but there's still Logan. So it's lower middle class. So you may be sitting on this property, it's holding its own, but there's potential opportunity cost that you missed out on. And there's been a lot of investors going into that market. That's probably the other thing that
a lot of them are talking about, because you've got Brisbane, you've got the Gold Coast, and they say, well, that's going to be one big super city at some stage. But there's a lot of population that's got to come before it becomes one big super city. So you might sit on this for 10 years waiting for that. We're never advocates of future potential. I mean, people have often said there's this coming, but is it there? No. Well, you might be waiting for a while. So again, my thoughts are categorise it right. For us, it's not a growth asset.
No.
Some may differ with us, but for us, it's not a growth asset. It's more of an income asset, and maybe if you get the timing right, it's a balanced asset.
And you've brought something up there for me, which I failed to mention, but thank you for doing it. A lot of investors who chase yield, and there's a lot of them around the country, and there's a lot of professionals who help clients chase yield. And the idea is that yield attracts a demand, but it's an investor demand. So there is risk in that investor demand that's artificially inflating prices. So what's a good example? Hobart probably is not a bad example at the moment, where there may not be, the market's moving, it's been moving since the middle of 2016, and it probably could have a reasonable run. But the majority of the people who are looking to buy there could be borderless investors chasing the yield, thinking that it's so affordable down there, and so I'll get into it. So you've still got to make sure that the underlying economics of the area is what's going to drive it. Now there might be a 10 or 15% gain, and then it'll just flatline.
Yeah.
So it might go 30% and then come back 10 or 15. So we're fortunate. One of our buyers agents lived and worked down there. Had
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
She's and she's the one saying don't buy now. So
well, as we always say, it's okay to bring interstate money into these locations. But it's the locals that are going to rent it, and it's the locals that are going to get a local job to be able to afford to rent it.
And the value will find its level in with that owner occupier want. So ultimately there is risk. So I say the same about Western Sydney, that some of the price growth that we've seen out there is unbelievable. And I suspect that if the economy was to improve and rates were to go higher, then we would actually see a lot of those areas start to come off their peaks. And then there could be some flat periods. So it's a really good question, and it really gets us into markets within markets. It gets us within different growth assets, yield assets, balanced assets. It had everything, didn't it? It was really good.
Really great question. Whose turn is it, me or you?
No, I think it's me. Okay. Clayton on Facebook. He says, "Hi, I would love to get your opinion on buying off the plan properties and what to look out for. This course of action has been put forward by a mortgage broker / real estate developer in Brisbane who will benefit from both the commission on the mortgage and the property itself. They have openly disclosed this. The property will be an investment and not my principal place of residence. Love the show. Keep up the good work."
Yeah, good question, Clayton. I think we have covered this a bit over the journey, Ben, but I think it's so incredibly important because people keep going back to the well. The first thing I'd say about that is if you're taking advice from someone, take advice from someone who's only selling advice.
Yep.
Because we've got to remove the conflict of interest.
Yep, there's a conflict. There's a vested interest. They might not call it conflict because they think they're helping. That mortgage broker / real estate professional actually may not know any better. May not listen to the podcast.
Well, enthusiastic amateur.
Enthusiastic amateur, that's right.
We talked about that. So someone could say, "You're a hypocrite, Bryce." So I don't have a stock list in this office. Someone walks in here and they ask me to help them. I can't solve the problem in 2 minutes by pulling a brochure. I can't.
No.
I have to clarify, evaluate, plan, implement, and manage.
Yes.
So our 5 steps, Ben. And part of that is when someone comes in here and says, "What should I buy?" I go, "I don't know. Let's talk a bit. Let's find out." And then once I get a brief, I'm off. I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks because I'm out. I've got to go and find it. So I sell my service. I don't sell a product, even though the end thing is bricks and mortar. So I think that's an important thing. So off the plan is typically because I've said it in the book. I have been on the off the plan team.
Yep.
So and I can look all of those people in the eye because it was so long ago that they've done well, right?
Yep.
But knowing what I know now, I would not have put those people into those properties.
Yep.
So ultimately,
you've refined your investment research and selection.
Got better
process.
information and gave better advice. That's my view.
Pure and simple.
So off the plan is largely fails the scarcity test for me in most cases.
Yes.
Now, for those that are going to write into us, there is a small minority of off the plans that actually are okay. So I get that.
Yep.
But for the majority of people, they're getting burnt. And we're seeing people who, I think it was you, Ben, saying the other day, and forgive me if I'm cutting off your story here, where someone was given advice around SMSF, where they had 35k balance to buy a property. They're now financially ruined. And the advisor's going to get more in commission for the 2 properties than the person had as a balance in their super fund. It's criminal. I'll probably cut you off.
Well, yes, it is criminal. What that person done has not been in the best interests of the client, clear and simple. They're now facing economic hardship. I had another email, this year as well, where people have written in and said, I've taken some advice from someone who who was a real estate agent working, as a property sales company, and they've put me into a location that's now massively oversupplied, and I can't get the property rented. The property value has dropped significantly, and I'm facing, economic ruin and a financial ruin, and that breaks your heart.
Well,
it really does.
Conversations, because it's
Totally.
hard to come back from.
Totally, and it's not lost. I don't think it's lost on the people who are potentially giving it. There's absolutely some crooks and sharks out there. There's no doubt about that. We rabbit on about these idiot spruikers. But there are some others who, are naive amateurs in terms of they don't know any better. They've been trained up by a sales manager, and they're out there to sell properties and make a quid, and make a living. Now, until they actually know what's available, that's always hard work. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was in Sydney at the start of the year, and I went to a Rentvestors investment property in Macquarie Street in Sydney, and the person who owned that property bought that property off the plan for 1.6 million. It was a 3-bedroom, lovely property. And it's probably now worth about 3.2 million. Right, so there is an example of someone who's bought off the plan. Now, what was interesting about that property? There was only 2 apartments on the floor. There was scarcity, 3-car garage. So scarcity. So and basically overlooked the Botanic Gardens and out towards the heads. Stunning views.
Human interest, human behaviour.
And can never be built out, because effectively where it was on Macquarie Street was basically, there's the botanical gardens and everything else outside of that, and glimpses around the corner of the Opera House. That's it. So in examples like that, and we will see developers start to listen to owner-occupier appeal, and that had owner-occupier appeal. So, they're choosing to rent there and build out their portfolio in other ways, but that's a perfect example of the exception to the rule.
Yeah, but most investors aren't paying 1.6. Most investors they're getting stung between 400 and 800.
Totally, and that's where the supply side, especially for apartments, is risky, because unless you have exclusive location, unless you have, the 2-car garage is a really big one, but developers know they can't just dig, deeper and deeper into the ground. It's expensive to dig into the ground and engineer the building out of the ground, so they can only offer you 1 car spot. And that's the practicality test coming into the future. But right now, I don't want to take a punt with clients' money to sort of go into these types of developments, and that the oversupply risk is real.
So there you go, Clayton. Our view on off-the-plan properties is well documented. We say buyer beware, and again, for that, there are a few that it works for those people who want to write us an email to say that the blanket rule. But generally speaking, for the people, if they're buying it as their first investment property and it's their first introduction into the world of property investing, I would say that you need to
do the numbers, to be cautious, and don't forget, if you're buying into an apartment block, there's ongoing holding costs, lifts. Like this one had a concierge, had a private lift to the floor. It was like...
Ask yourself the question, Ben, would you want to be in your boardies or your girlfriend or your wife in her bikini as they're at the communal pool when there's 3,000 sets of eyes looking at them, or in the gym when, mate, people aren't using these common facilities when they're massive. Yeah. And so, but you're paying for it as an investor.
Yep.
So the reason we like the flats, for example, as a direct, there's no pool, no caretaker, no lift. So the body corporate is appealing to both groups. The body corporate is appealing to the owner-occs because it's cheap, but it's also appealing to the investor because it's cheap.
You don't want your rent just to cover your body corporates, do you? There's got to be something in it for you.
So there's a little tip, Ben. Do your rental yield after body corporate. So when you're comparing, do a rental yield.
Brilliant.
Do a rental yield after body corporate comparison on a flat. Yep. Do a rental yield on an after body corporate on a brand new off the plan apartment.
Yep.
Then see what the return is.
Yep. Totally. Brilliant. Great advice.
Very good. So
that's it.
Mate, we've flown. I've got a couple here, Mom, but we're going to take over too much time. So my life hack today, Ben, is this one's for you actually.
Oh, okay.
Our listeners may not know, but Ben does 2 shifts. He's Monday to Thursday. He's working in the office with us, and then you go home and you do another shift at night. You're often not napping until 1 o'clock at night.
Yes.
So the screen on our computers is a lot of blue light. But as soon as the sun goes down, that's not good news. The blue light means you won't sleep and all those sorts of things. You need a warmer colour. So, again, all of my life hacks are royalty free. I'm not getting paid. There's no affiliate relationship. But there's, for people to go and Google, if you haven't, f.lux, f.lux.
Okay, yep.
I download onto my computer. As soon as the sun sets, my computer recognises the sunset and it drops all of the blue out of the screen. So when I'm working at night,
So it feels like it's just dimming.
you actually see it happening.
Yep.
And then when you're looking at night, your eyes aren't straining. And then
Yes.
when you turn the laptop off, you are going to sleep. You're not being buzzed by all this.
It's better for your eyes.
F.Lux, check it out if you like. So potentially it's a life hack, folks, for those of you without
it's a ripper.
surface road.
It's a
But,
beautiful.
I've got to tell you, it's made a difference. My wife uses it, I use it, and it's just easier to look at it because I'm guilty of working too long at night.
Well, how many
as well.
people read off their iPads?
Yep.
And the same problem occurs. So you can dim it down as well, but that's
You want another life hack on your iPad? You go to the settings and just reverse it. So you know how you normally white on your iPad white with black writing?
Yeah.
There's a night version and it will go black with white writing.
There it is, right there. See?
So because that's how I read it.
How do I
go?
Where do I
It's
get to that?
It's actually pretty straightforward. I'll show you. But
Settings.
let me see if I can quickly.
And talk it through. So we
talk
go
it through.
settings. No?
So let's say I'm in iBooks and I'm looking at a.
It's an iBook, right? Yep.
Let's say I'm looking at this book here.
Yep. My Personal MBA. Very good book.
And then we'll go see this one here, Ben.
Auto night theme. Yep.
And then it'll flick it. So as soon as
beautiful.
it senses it's night, it'll flick back to black.
So it's not a settings thing that is automatic. Okay.
No.
But that's still good.
But
If you're reading books-
I'm an Apple guy, so I don't know how to do it on Android. But ultimately, because I read at night,
Yep.
and I often read something when I shouldn't be just before I
You're
go
right,
to bed. When I
Well, that's
shouldn't
why
be
the
exposing
Kindles have
myself
got
to light.
They've got a separate type of light. The Kindle things are built for.
Yeah, Kindle's good for that.
Yeah, so they don't hurt your eyes.
Yeah.
So very good, mate. That's a ripper.
So there you go. F.Lux.
Very good. Now I've got to do my my stats, my interesting stat. What's it called? What's the segment called?
Did you know?
That's right. My Did You Know property.
Yeah.
Did you know? Now this one's Madge's.
Madge?
I'm going to talk about Madge today.
You want to talk about corgis?
Corgis and our Queen.
Yeah.
So the Queen of England, Queen of Australia,
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth II, I think she is.
Yeah.
Anyway, she's our head of state. She's got a McDonald's, mate.
Fair dinkum.
We were talking property.
Yeah.
She's got a Macca's. She's got a Macca's, and also where she was born, they knocked it down and built a Chinese restaurant. Now, where did I know all this from? There's two little fun bits, but there's a great little article that I saw last year on realestate.com.au.
We might put a link on Facebook, guys.
I think we will. It's called The 8 Fun Facts About the Queen's Property Empire.
Mm.
And yeah, she's got a Macca's. So how
she
does
owns
that
a
work?
Macca's?
She owns a Macca's indirectly. She doesn't own a Macca's.
Yeah.
The property that she owns and commercial portfolio just happens to have a Macca's drive-through in it.
Yeah.
I like the idea that she was.
Would you like high tea with that?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And her commercial property empire, what do you reckon it's worth?
Oh, it'd have to be worth a couple of mil, wouldn't it?
Keep going. Couple more.
My guess would be in the billions, but I don't know how much.
So 11,500 million quid, which is basically 11.5 billion dollars is her commercial
She
property.
looks so well dressed.
She's getting around a bit.
Mate.
Yeah,
She was in a nice car.
That's why I reckon she can get all that. She can afford all that jewellery.
Yeah.
In fact, I reckon a few banks would probably lend her a bit. I reckon
Yeah,
she's good
I
for
think
it.
she's got a bank guarantee.
I
on that.
think she's good for it. There's a couple of others there. I won't give it all away.
Yeah.
But that's 8 interesting things or facts you may not have known about Madge.
About
Our Queen Elizabeth. She's lovely. She's been good for us.
Well, mate, I did.
She's a good girl.
For your reference, I did not know that.
You didn't know that?
So that was really good intel.
Oh, just a bit of fun. I'm still carrying on with these wealthy themes, aren't I? Though I have to keep. I have to break it up.
All right. Well, no, that's all. That's all good. That's what. Just give someone something to stick around for. So there you go, folks. Hopefully that's helped you with some other people's Q&A at the coalface. If you're about to buy an investment property this week, hopefully that will be of benefit to you. And guys, we love the questions. We will guarantee, Ivis. We will guarantee we will do one Q&A per month this year. Guaranteed.
Well, because we can't think of anything else to do. That's not true. We've got lots to talk about.
Oh, mate, if people are writing in, that's what they want to hear.
Well, we want to answer the questions. Free, nothing like good free advice. Hopefully,
we don't give advice, mate.
What do we give?
We give information for people to go and independently verify.
Yes,
we give information.
Today's show is general in nature, and please seek independent.
Exactly. Don't take any advice from us, folks. Go and check it out. But
Easter
so wise.
going away.
I am.
Yep.
I am. Where am I going? I am going to down to Apollo Bay.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Very good.
What about you?
Heading up to the Murray.
Yeah.
Parents' property up the
Just
Yarrawonga.
Over the ranges for the better weather.
So what's our tip for our listeners?
Don't eat too much chocolate because a moment on the lips is a lifetime on the hips.
Jesus. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. I was sort of thinking more of drive safely.
Oh yeah, no, that's it. Mate, it's big chocolate weekend. I'm just miserable that I can't eat it. So that's why I just like, come on, back off, folks. But eat as much as you like.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I'll be doing.
Yeah. Oh, you were saying before you've got a little bit of a roof over the tool shed. Is that going to...
Well, since this back operation, mate, there is a little bit of a roof over the tool shed. I need to do a bit of walking
right.
over Easter, or maybe even the odd run.
It's all right, buddy. You're okay.
I don't know about that.
Okay.
I sat down here and it's just like, oh, where's that belt buckle
you're right,
gone?
actually.
You know,
Mate.
there's a little
Side
bit there.
profile, you're in trouble.
I know. The chocolate's going to go straight to the hips, Bryce. Straight to the hips.
There you go. Looks like you can obviously see we need that break. We
need some time off.
We need some time off. But until next week, Ben.
So he's like.
See ya later.